Hello, guys. Welcome to the divisional round recap of Cast. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Ooh, so this is going to be kind of a quicker episode. With that being said, I kind of want to do a recap, but I want to talk about winners and losers of the divisional round games. Clearly, we know who won and lost, but I kind of want to do something different where I talk about like what part of the team, maybe won or lost and stuff of that nature. We'll obviously go in order, starting with Houston Ravens, Packers 49ers, Buccaneers Lions, and then Chiefs Bills. And we'll talk about every single game. And I guess, for my initial tidbit, I'll say that I'm going to record my video and it's going to be I'm going to try to verse it as best as I can. So you guys can so the video isn't too like long and elaborated. And I am just going to full cam it. I thought about showing the stats for each game, but I'm kind of going to go over I'm going to kind of go over the over each, game and be looking at the stats. You guys will kind of understand like what the stats were and why I'm thinking such things. I did try to catch every single game. Of course, I watched my Packers. If you watched my reaction video afterwards, I kind of put, and I'm going to try to leave out my personal opinion. I'm going to try to leave out my personal opinion on each games until we actually talk about them. And so that this video is going to be unbiased. All right. Starting with my winners and losers of the divisional round. We had Houston at Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, the Ravens won 34-10. But one thing that I wanted to say about Houston is that while they lost by quite 24 points, I would say that the winners of this team are their O-line. They allowed 0 pressures and 0 sacks on CJ Stroud. And ultimately, their line was the best part of their offense the entire game. And the offensive losers of Houston are CJ Stroud. He wasn't really pressured or sacked, but still only went 19 for 30 of 33 for 175 yards. Which, yes, it's 5.3 average, but I'm sure we're all expecting maybe a little bit better, even against this Ravens team. But it shows that he still has some growing to do against a championship caliber defense. Not that there's anything wrong with him. I think that it is a bummer to end the year like this. But the thing I'll say about the Texans and the reason why they're also a winner this year is because they made it to the divisional round and beat a Browns team in the first round that nobody thought they had any business beating. The rushing attack and the receiving attack of Houston, besides Nico Collins, who even Nico Collins, you could argue with 10 targets, didn't really do too well. Could have had more than 68 yards, averaged 13.6 a catch. But overall, I think, and the rushing attack was absolutely abysmal. But looking, at their defense did do pretty well. I would say that they are losers in the sense that they need to raise their consistency, but I will also say that they're winners in the sense that they were able to get good pressure on Lamar and sack him 3 times, which with a guy like Lamar, who is like the Energizer Bunny back there, clearly some breakdowns that D'Amico Ryans is going to have to plan for, because there's a good amount of, obviously the Houston, if they're going to do anything next year, they're likely probably going to have to possibly play the Ravens again. But overall, I would say the pressure they put on Lamar for him to not be able to throw very much is a positive, but their inability to contain him the whole game was a loss. Like, it's kind of bizarre to say that, like, yes, they pressured him, and if you can pressure a quarterback and make him flush out into your arms, it's good, but if you don't do it into your arms, it's bad. Like, that's just kind of my analogy. And I know it's kind of obscure or whatever, and it sounds kind of, convoluted, like, oh, the pressure they had didn't matter type of thing, but it does matter, if you're playing the style of defense to not allow him to break containment. Now, looking at Baltimore, the clear winner of the offense was the rushing attack. Lamar had a day. Hill contributed, Edwards contributed. Dalvin Cook in his first game with them, obviously being a playoff game. And to me, Dalvin Cook doesn't have too much playoff experience, even for how good of a back he is, because of the Vikings' inability to do well in the playoffs while he had been there. But the rushing attack overall had 5.5 yards per carry, which you're never gonna really have a hard time losing a game unless you have 0 red zone efficiency, which clearly the Ravens had. One thing I would say for losers was the passing attack. They had a total of 152 yards, and yes, it was a 9.5 yard average per reception, but only 16 receptions and 21 targets total. And Lamar Jackson, he did pretty good on the pass, no picks. But the highlight of this game is the ability of the Ravens to run the ball, which has always been really dangerous in playoff football. And they do it better than I think anybody else, to be honest with you, which is another reason why their complementary football is so hard to contend with a hard-nosed defense. The Baltimore defensive winners is, I would say that they forced a fumble. They forced a fumble, obviously, and they had, a few tackle for losses, but obviously Roquan Smith playing, like he's poised and ready for, to step into the playoffs and do well for the first time in his career. I mean, he's a pretty seasoned vet, second only to me to Fred Warner. But obviously the defense also just playing very scrappy, forcing a lot of contested throws to be deflected. I think there was 4 deflections here. Yep, 4 passes defensed. And, just overall, hard-nosed defense and a rushing attack that is going to make it hard for the other team to catch up. So that's my analysis of the winners and losers of Houston versus Baltimore. Moving on, we have Packers who had visited the 49ers. Winners and losers of this game. The Niners, in a sense, the reason why I'm going to say they're kind of losers right off the bat is the injury to Deebo Samuel early. He obviously seemed like he was going to be a key part of their game plan, and losing him to a shoulder injury that they say is now a 50-50 could be huge for their Super Bowl hopes, to be honest with you, because Deebo Samuel is the heart and soul of this offense. And while, people might say they still have McCaffrey, Kittle, and Ayuk, Deebo is the gadget that he just does a bit of everything, and he really brings that spark to the offense, I feel like. Like, don't get me wrong, I think McCaffrey will get his yards, because he led the league in yards, but I think if, you don't have these other weapons drawing from him, I think that McCaffrey can be contained and that sort of thing. I'll start with Green Bay. Clear kind of losers of the game, I would say. It's kind of hard to say with this because it was such a close game, and I'm trying to be unbiased, even because obviously I'm a Packers fan. The clear losers of this game, I would say the Packers as an offensive unit, the late game offense of the Packers is our losers, because yes, we had a shot to get 24 with Anders Carlson's kick, but then, you had other drives too that ended up being an interception to Greenlaw, the first one from Love to Greenlaw, which, obviously cut the drive short. And then other ones that were like a 3-and-out, where ultimately the Packers as a whole offensive unit failed alongside the kicker, who had, made all his field goals up until that point in the game. So the offensive unit of the Packers, I would say, the late game offensive unit of the Packers, because otherwise they played fine. I don't feel like there was anybody who really took from the game, in terms of the offense, except for the fact that late, maybe Love started to feel the pressure, or maybe he was getting anxiety because they weren't moving the ball, and he made just a kind of misjudged throw that was obviously forced. That's kind of, to me, that's one of the reasons for the growing pains with him, is that yes, we had experienced in the season these droughts from the Packers where Love would just hoist it up type of thing. But I think he gets a little impatient, and he's pretty composed for the most part, but he lets his impatience get to him, which I don't think he would admit, but I think that's what kind of has led to some of his interceptions. And of course the game losing interception to Greenlaw at the very end. But overall, the offensive unit kind of failed. I would say one loser, I guess, would be Zach Tom. The only reason I say him is because he was having a spectacular game against Bosa, proving he is one of the better right tackles in the game, and in the league, this season, where it's like his PFF and his pressures allowed and sacks allowed were very low. And obviously, as a young player, you hope to test your mettle against the best. And in back-to-back weeks against Parsons and then Bosa, he fared very well, but then got put out with a concussion, which I do think that was one of the reasons why the Packers struggled offensively, is because the protection was a lot worse once he left. So yeah, overall an offensive unit that failed. And late in the game. Otherwise, I can't really critique the Packers offense too much. Obviously, Love is kind of a lose, he's kind of a loser in a sense here because he threw 2 picks, and otherwise he had like 23 touchdowns to 2 picks or something before, the second one of this game where it's like 23-3. Still a crazy good ratio that any QB would want to have, albeit that it eliminates you from the playoffs with the last one, but it's hard for a QB to keep that up. Even for Rodgers, it was damn near impossible. But looking at the defense, I would also say that one of the losers should be Joe Barry. To me, he called a game where he gave up yards, but he was ultimately not giving up that many points. But then on several key plays, you give up, 3 touchdowns that were essentially free in a sense. The least free one to me maybe was the Lon McCaffrey run, where it just looked like the Packers were in like a deep coverage. The blockers for the Niners got upfield very easily, where it was one guy to miss or one guy to make the tackle, depending on who you're rooting for to get the touchdown. And McCaffrey, clearly, is usually going to make that guy miss unless he's a truly gifted safety. But, yeah, so I would say Joe Barry is a loser based on the sense that you call a pretty good game, but then there's some boneheaded calls that you make that ultimately give up free touchdowns and that sort of thing. But looking at the Niners, I would say that Brock Purdy, and this isn't out of hatred or anything, but I would say he's a loser of this game. Clearly shows that he can't play in the elements still, and there was a game earlier this year that they mentioned that he's just not good. He just can't grip the ball. He can't throw effectively. Even when he did score a touchdown late in the game to get the lead, some of those balls were just toss-ups for the wide receivers to give him a chance, which really doesn't, define his ability and his persona of being an accurate pocket passer. Because obviously he did have like a run, where he broke containment, and that sort of thing. But he's known for being an accurate passer and being the point guard assist style guy for all these good weapons that he has. Where, if you're not making these accurate passes, you might as well have somebody else that can at least do something consistently on their legs. But I would also say McCaffrey's a winner. Obviously, like he didn't have a lot of big runs, but to me, he had, a good amount of, dump down, drop off catches that went for usually like, 4 or 5 yards or even sometimes more. And then he also had a pretty good run game where it's like he clearly, was able to, control this game as best as he could, and prove that he's still that guy that's going to play till the very end and not deter at the least bit. But otherwise, I would also say the losers are the passing attack of San Fran, but that kind of goes hand in hand with a number of the inaccuracies that Purdy had, where it's like, do these guys have a chance to catch the ball? But there were some drops, like Kittle had a drop. And just some of these that it's like, clearly the passing attack needs to be better if this team is going to make the Super Bowl. And if they don't have Debo, can they get it done passing? In terms of the defense for the Niners, I would say that they're winners in the sense that, they sealed the game and gave their offense a shot. Otherwise, I wouldn't really say that their pass attack struck home. I think that the Packers did a really good job, at least, and I mean a very, very good job before Zach Tom went out. And then even when Zach Tom went out, I still feel like they did really well. And this is supposed to be the best D-line in football. You obviously have Nick Bosa, you have Chase Young, and then you have Eric Armstead, who was returning, but no sacks the whole game, which is kind of troublesome considering you're going up against a team with arguably the best O-line in the Lions in the league, and maybe even the best O-line in the playoffs, potentially. We have the Niners, I think, have a good O-line. The Lions, of course, do. And I think that the Baltimore has a pretty good O-line. I can't really say whether I think the Chiefs O-line is still as good as good as it was, to be honest with you. But overall for the Niners, I think that as a team, they won, which is, the end result, and who cares how you get it done. But you also look at it that this was a team that was 10 point advantage team going into the game, and they only won by 3 points. So you're happy you won, but if I was a Niners fan, I would be genuinely worried about my ability to win and even win in the Super Bowl if things don't change, because eking out wins like this, yeah, you'd be happy if you won the Super Bowl regardless if you eked out a win, but it doesn't really, with the star-studded team you have, it doesn't really bode well for future years if you can't command a game with all the talent that you have. But that's my own personal take on that. I think that, people were talking about the Niners being potentially the best team in the postseason, which I know for me, I think the Ravens are the best. But, I really think, and I think after this weekend, I think the Ravens are easily the best. But moving on to Lions-Buccaneers. Lions-Buccaneers. A winner of this game, I would like to say, is Jared Goff. I think he played really, really well. He was even pressured at times, but he was able to close the game and do accurate passes. I think he's tempered himself down a bit, and he was able to carry this team. Obviously, the other thing, too, is Jahmyr Gibbs is a winner here. David Montgomery didn't really do too much. He had a very kind of average game, if you can call it that, with 3.3 yards a carry. And I mean, the crazy thing is that one of his was a 11-yard, run. That was his long. So it's like he had 9 carries on 22 yards, which is not promising. But yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, clear winner, did really well. And I mean, even made Antoine Winfield, who, everyone thinks that he, should have been in the Pro Bowl and that he was snubbed with how well he's played this year. Looking at the passing attack, I think the passing attack for the Lions is a clear winner as well. Not anybody with a ton of yards, but everyone contributing. Amon-Ra, Laporta, Gibbs, Jamison Williams, Brock Wright, and even Josh Reynolds, having a big catch late in the game. And David Montgomery actually contributing there, making up for a little bit of his lackluster run game. So yeah, the passing attack of Detroit looking very good, where, you're going to have to cover all your bases, if you're the Niners next week playing Detroit, if Goff is distributing it like this. The defense of Detroit also coming up big, getting to Baker quite a bit, who isn't the easiest guy to bring down. I get that he's not the fastest guy, but Baker never gives up on a play. Some of these sacks were hard fought, where they had to get a hand on him, he had to escape, and then they had to get another person in on him. But overall, good tenacity by the Detroit pass rush, and even, and at times, their pass defense looked bad, but they did come away with 2 turnovers, which, a game winning turnover, much like, Packers 49ers, by the rookie on the Lions. You know, and of course, that sealed the game. The Lions winning, they're for the first time going to the NFC Championship game and winning 2 postseason games at home. Now, Tampa Bay winners, I would say Baker, even with the disappointing loss, he's a clear winner, because I think that he secured a job, whether it's with the Buccaneers or somewhere else, that I think he looks like a guy with a lot of grit and is ready to, lead a team. And, Tampa Bay was doing really good on the passing attack besides the interception. And, winner Mike Evans, proven that he can still carry a team. Him and Baker seem to have really good chemistry to me. And they should have both those guys back next year. Because Mike Evans is one of those guys that even at his age, he can go up and grab it over almost any corner, and he's always going to be a threat. You add just another piece on this offensive passing attack, then, watch out, especially the NFC South. That is not that good of a division. And also, winner, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they looked really, really sketch all year. I do get that last week they played an Eagles team that had a very bad mental, but I think that them getting to the divisional round was something that, I wouldn't have said it. I would have said, oh, there's going to be some other team that's going to snuff them out in the wild card round, but, and I mean, yes, they defeated a wounded Eagles team, I guess, as you could say, but they persevered at the end of the year, and it is not easy to overcome the odds to make sure you get into the playoffs, and win game in, game out with that kind of pressure. So kudos to them. Hopefully, I mean, I don't really think they have to be in a rebuild. I think they're a couple pieces away from being a good team again. And I guess, I'll say winners Detroit for, having the first time ever where you've won 2 home playoff games. Ever in the history of the franchise. But overall, that's kind of what I have for this game. Looking at Chiefs Bills. The Chiefs, I don't understand it. I don't understand what I want. So here's what I'll say. And it's gonna be harsh on Buffalo, but you are at home. Yes, the Chiefs probably weren't affected by the cold weather very much because they played in the 4th coldest the week before in a ridiculous kind of game. But Buffalo Bills, you have all of these guys, available on your team, like Kincaid, Diggs, James Cook. The only guy you don't have is Davis, who may have been a big blow to your passing attack, but judging by the numbers and the completion percentages anyway, it wasn't a game where anybody was going to pass for a crazy amount. Looking at Mahomes, he's 17 at 23, which I think is kind of crazy in a game like this. For 215 yards, where he gouged essentially your wounded defense is what I'll say. You're banged up in Buffalo defense, where it's like you have one of the best minds with Sean McDermott, and there's only so much a coach can overcome. I said it last year when the Niners lost because they lost other QBs. Like, Shanahan's brilliant, but he's not going to pull out some random QB that's, completely not tested and be like, okay, here's what you do, and we win the game. Because you do need at least a little bit of talent to coax, and, But looking at Josh Allen, throwing 39 times, I would say he's a loser in the sense that he was made to have to win this game for his team. He also didn't have an actual turnover. He did have like a fumble. But I remember in the week coming into this game that Josh Allen, he's undefeated when not committing a turnover. And I mean, I guess I don't know if I'm sure they don't count it as. I'm sure it's not a turnover if he fumbles it and his team recovers it. But this was obviously the first game in my mind where he didn't commit a turnover and they lost. And I feel really bad for their kicker, Bass, who's a really good kicker. Clearly, hadn't missed a field goal at this, and then he barely whiffs it. But it was a cold and windy game where it's like nothing is a guarantee. And the playoffs, the pressure is amplified. And Bass, unfortunately, I'm going to say he's a loser of this game because essentially prevented his team from potentially reaching the championship game because of the missed kick. And the Bills just being unable to stop Pacheco, essentially, from getting a first down and sealing the game for the Chiefs. I would like to say, too, the Bills team as a whole, this obviously wasn't their full roster because they're pretty banged up, type of thing. But coming into the game, even with the banged up, even with being as banged up as you are, you had to feel pretty good. Having done good offensive things the week before, having, handled your business at the end of the season where it's like, we're looking as good as anybody. And it's like, I don't know what to say other than that. If you're the Bills, where do you go from here? Yes, you keep drafting, you try to retain some of these guys, you try to keep healthy, but it seems like every year there's at least a couple guys injured. Like Tre'Davious White is always injured, who should be your star corner, but who knows after all these injuries if he still has it, to be honest with you. A guy gets injured for so long that you think when he comes back, what if he's not the same guy that we paid and made one of the highest paid cornerbacks years ago? I worry about it as a Packers fan with Jair. He's missed some time and the shoulder just hasn't seemingly been the same. He does come back with, a spark and grit, but then you get injured again and it's like, the clock is ticking on everybody's body. Whether they want to believe it or not. You can be the most physical freak one day, and then you have some crippling injury. But, losers of this game, too, was what I would say. I would say Allen as a player, mainly because, you do so much. You have over 250 yards yourself, passing it and then running it for 72 yards. You take a couple of your own linemen and their D linemen and try to cram yourself between them, and you take them a few yards in for a touchdown. If that doesn't motivate your team to start playing and spark your team, maybe your team has a motivational problem. I mean, I know that I would love to, have a guy like that provides a spark and is essentially going to be like, well, you're going to have to literally rip this ball from my, cold, dead fingers in order to, have me lose this game, essentially mentality, where it's like, why doesn't that rub off on anybody else? Josh Allen clearly sick of sitting in the shadow of Patrick Mahomes. He just can't beat him in the postseason. And I'm sure he's getting really, really sick of it. But yeah, looking at the Chiefs, the receivers, I would say that the receiving threat are winners in this game. They didn't have a ton of yards, but they did have 3 guys that each had a reception that went for 25 yards or more. Kelsey, Valdez-Scantling, Rashee Rice, Noah Gray, even with, 3 targets and 16 yards. Isaiah Pacheco with 1 catch for 14 yards. Mecole Hardman did have his fumbling issues where he lost one, but overall, if you're Buffalo and you can win the turnover battle in this game and you still lose at home to Kansas City, that's gotta be a disappointing loss. And I feel for the Buffalo fans because they are some of the most diehard fans. You will always have them because they are football people. And it's like, there's nobody that can say that Josh Allen is without Super Bowl contention in his blood, where he's going to contend and he's going to compete every single play. But overall, the Buffalo Bills, I think, were honestly the biggest losers this weekend. And I guess some final notes about each team. Houston, I will say, you had a great season. And there's nowhere to go but up because of all the young talent, the rookie QB who is now, he's not going to be a rookie anymore once we see him again. And they're going to get more weapons for him because that O-line is clearly pretty good on there. So, final takes, Houston, big winners in the sense that they were in the divisional round and that they have a bright future. Ravens, they can clearly be a team that will be hard to beat for years to come, assuming they can do what they did this year. And, that they're still obviously in it. Green Bay, even though my team lost, I was kind of gut-wrenched because we had a very, very, very legitimate shot to win. But overall, if you had told me in like October or 9 weeks in or whatever the heck it was, where we were like 3-6 or whatever the heck it was, that we would make it to the divisional round and give the Niners a run for their money, I would have been like, that's insane. Even though, if you watch any of my stuff of what I said about the Packers, I'm like, I feel like, I was saying it all early. I was like, I feel like we're on the cusp that if we can overcome the first half slumps that we had for, most of the season until the later half, that we would be a dangerous team because we had like the most second half points scored in the league or something like that. And the only thing that I think is not bright is if we don't change our D coordinator, because we have so much talent on the defensive side of the ball. But otherwise, crazy bright future for Love and at least the offense. San Fran, you guys prove that you don't falter, I guess, and that you'll still keep trying to compete. But overall, I think, this weekend, it kind of shows that you are potential losers. Because I believe, it's not really next year that you're going to lose a ton of guys, but the following year you have more guys than you could possibly, re-sign if they are going to ask for the asking price of what they are actually worth, to be honest with you, in 2026. So the clock is ticking, and a lot of the opinions, including my own, are that it is win now for San Fran. But injuries, have plagued not only, this season, but last season and seasons before. And they add up. And it really shows that, maybe you are susceptible to being, crippled, because it is hard to be 100% later in the year. Tampa Bay, same kind of thing. You maybe found your QB for the unforeseeable future, not a huge one. Obviously Baker's not up there in age by a lot, but you got to make sure that he's able to keep on playing, the way that he did at the end of this year, because he was wildly inconsistent in my opinion this year. But winners, of their season, Detroit. I can't say enough about how Detroit keeps on battling. The one thing that will destroy their team is if a team, has an insane passing attack against them. I think that there's still some matchups that are very, very unfavorable against really, really good QBs because their secondary is porous. Otherwise, you've put together a fine team and you can be good for years, where you just need to kind of fix your pass defense in terms of your DBs and your corners, because I think your pass rush is coming along. But that's my overall take on each team and, where they're at and what I think about their futures. Otherwise, I'm not sure, I said other news, but I don't think there's really too much other news, to be honest with you. I might. Looking at, I guess, I'll look at the games, the two games we have for next week. We have Lions, 49ers, and then we have Chiefs, Baltimore. I'll be honest with you. I don't think the Chiefs have much of a shot against the Ravens. I think the Ravens have a very good mix of youth and vets, which is why they're so good. And that usually is the balance to make a team good. It's hard to win with just vets, who, have been in the league, and it's like, unless they're like a dignified vet like Aaron Donald or something like that can, change a game. But you need some young, splashy talent that can make plays too. But looking at the game, I think that, the Chiefs, they do always seem to amaze, in the postseason. And it's like, I even thought that they would do worse against the Bills. I thought the Bills were going to win, to be honest with you. But it doesn't surprise me that they lose by 3, to be honest, because those games have always been kind of close. And it's become probably the rivalry in the AFC. unless we see Chiefs Ravens, more in future years, which I think could be more dynamic in the sense that like Lamar Jackson, is a barring that he, if he, you don't want him to be hurt or anything or whatever. I think the matchup is, could be just as good, if not better, than Bills Chiefs, just because the rivalry. I mean, and I guess who knows if we can call it a rivalry if the Chiefs always win, even if they barely win. If they always win, it's still one of those things that people aren't going to get out of their mind. Like when was last time the Bills beat the Chiefs? Even I can't say. Um, Looking at San Fran and the Lions, I think if San Fran plays the way they did against the Packers this week, I think they're doomed. I think that the Lions obviously have a great right tackle as well in Penei Sewell, who's, more proven than Zach Tom. But they have, a very good O-line as well. And yes, the Niners, their streak of, not letting up a 100-yard rusher was broken, for Aaron, against Aaron Jones, hitting 100 in that game. But I think that, if Jahmyr Gibbs, plays the way he did and they plug him into certain situations, I think that that's one thing that could, potentially cripple the Niners is if, they're pounding it with Montgomery, even if he's not getting a ton of yards, and then you plug in Gibbs and he can gouge. I think that that could be a huge problem for the Niners. I'm not saying that I think the run defense is bad, but, Jahmyr Gibbs, is a little bit faster than Aaron Jones. Probably not as hard running where he's going to like put in every effort to get every single yard, but he's just a home run waiting to happen with his speed. And their O-line is arguably better than the Packers. I think that the Packers have a very underrated O-line, but the O-line of the Lions is very proven and tried and true. So, and I mean, looking at the Niners, yes, the Lions have arguably one of the worst, pass defenses in the league. But I think overall, if you're if you're worrying about Debo or Debo's not fully healthy, even if he plays and he's not 100%, are you really going to risk using him a ton to win a game and then go to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs or the Ravens, who are probably, not going to let him do that much if he's not fully healthy? And Shanahan wants him to be fully healthy if they're in the Super Bowl, because otherwise the game plan just isn't to me as cunning or elusive as to what you're going to do. Because yes, you have Kittle, Ayuk, and McCaffrey, but you look at even the Packers defense and it has been shaky, and there were definitely and a lot of what the stops ended up being with, when the Niners were playing the Packers, were that Purdy missed a throw, and then he had the one good drive at the end where he threw some balls deep. One of them, Jennings went up to go get it, over like, 3 Packers around him or whatever it was. And it's like, it didn't look pretty. It's like throw up balls, you're fortunate that you come down with those, and you're fortunate that the Packers also didn't pick you off like twice earlier in the game. So, and that's just one of those things, is that I feel like the Lions, while they don't have a good passing attack, they have a good pass rush, but they don't have a good, defensive backs for coverage. They're very opportunistic. They've proved that time and time again. It's even the reason why they beat the Chiefs week 1 this year. But, so if you're making mistakes against them and you give them any glimmer of hope, it's dangerous football. Of what, it's like I said, if I was a Niners fan, I would not be reassured by how my guys how my guys played, last Saturday. And I'm not saying that out of hate, but it wasn't a very pretty game. You could blame the rain all you want, but it's like it's California, it's on the ocean. What if it rains next week? And then the rushing attack of the Lions, that just takes over the game. Or you're dipping and dunking with Amon Ra and these other guys, with Goff all game, and he's putting no risk, the ball into no risk, with those kinds of passes. Otherwise, I don't have too much more to say. I think time will tell, obviously, and we'll probably know a bit more about injuries, even though I don't think that there was very many for the remaining teams, if any, besides Debo's obviously a big blow. But we'll know more, and if nobody has anything to say or anything to ask me, I think I've went on, for quite a while what I think about these remaining teams as well as the teams that they played. If there is nothing else from you guys, the viewers, I do want to say that I appreciate you watching this episode of Cast, and I'll see you next time. Go Pack Go.